Security, who let him in here? The shout sliced through the million-dollar gala. Daniel Hayes stood still, his humble delivery uniform making him look out of place among the elite. Mocking whispers and laughter rippled through the room. No one believed he belonged there. Suddenly, the doors burst open. Olivia Carter, the billionaire heiress, rushed in, her elegant evening gown flowing behind her as she panted in panic. She sprinted toward Daniel, clutching his hand like a lifeline. Two men followed, their cold glares freezing the air. Daniel stepped forward, shielding her. "She's with me." Olivia froze, recognizing her savior. Daniel Hayes was 36 years old, a man whose presence was defined by a quiet, unwavering strength. He wasn't a man of many words, but his actions spoke volumes to those who knew him. Daniel was a single father, and his entire universe revolved around one person, his 8-year-old daughter, Lily. They lived in a modest, neatly kept house in a quiet suburb where the neighbors knew each other by name and children played safely in the streets. Daniel worked as a high-priority delivery driver for a logistics firm that handled sensitive equipment. He often took the grueling night shifts to ensure he could be home during the day to help Lily with her schoolwork, cook her nutritious meals, and attend every single one of her soccer games. He wore his company-issued navy blue uniform with a sense of pride, not because of the job itself, but because of the stability and safety it provided for his daughter. He taught Lily that every honest job deserved respect, regardless of the paycheck. He often sat her down and said, "Lily, character isn't built by the silk of the clothes you wear, but by the weight of the responsibility you carry on your shoulders." He was a man who had seen the world at its worst and its best, and he chose to live a life of quiet integrity. Their daily life was a masterpiece of discipline and deep affection. Every morning started with a shared breakfast, a ritual that grounded Daniel before he faced the long, unpredictable roads ahead. Since the day his wife, Sarah, had passed away after a long illness, Daniel had become a living shield for Lily. He protected her from the harshness of the world while nurturing her kind, creative spirit. He lived a low-profile life, avoiding unnecessary attention and focusing solely on his duties as a father and a worker. On this particular evening, the air was thick with the scent of a coming rainstorm. Daniel received a high-priority delivery request marked "Immediate Signature Required." It was a specialized tech component that needed to be delivered to the Grand Regal Hotel downtown, the venue for a massive invitation-only corporate gala hosted by the city's most influential and powerful families. Daniel didn't usually work these high-end metropolitan areas, preferring the quiet outskirts, but the overtime pay was essential for Lily's upcoming summer camp. He arrived at the hotel just as the sun was setting behind the skyscrapers, reflecting shades of deep orange and bruised purple off the glass buildings. The loading dock was a chaotic mess of high-end catering vans and floral delivery trucks. A stressed-out hotel event staffer, looking at his watch every 5 seconds, informed Daniel that the recipient, the chief coordinator, was currently on the main ballroom floor. To clear the package, Daniel needed a direct, physical signature on a digital tablet. Daniel checked his uniform in the rearview mirror. It was clean and pressed, but it was still just a worker's attire. He hesitated, knowing exactly how the people inside would view someone like him, but the job came first. He entered through the side service door, which, due to the sheer chaos of the massive event, led him through a shortcut directly into the edge of the grand reception hall. The transition was jarring. One moment he was in a narrow, dimly lit hallway smelling of industrial cleaner, and the next he was standing under massive crystal chandeliers that cost more than his house. The air was thick with the scent of expensive French perfume, aged scotch, and the quiet, confident hum of 100 elite conversations. Men in tailored $5,000 tuxedos and women in shimmering designer gowns glided across the polished marble floor like modern royalty. Daniel tried to stay along the shadows of the walls, his eyes searching for the event coordinator among the sea of wealth. But in a room filled with gold and glitter, a man in a navy blue delivery uniform stands out like a dark shadow on a sunny day. He could feel the eyes on him, sharp, judging, and cold. He heard the muffled giggles of a group of young socialites near the ornate floral arrangements. He saw the way people instinctively adjusted their posture, subtly distancing themselves from him as if his presence were a contagious stain on the perfection of the evening. Daniel didn't flinch. He didn't lower his head in shame. He simply adjusted the heavy package in his arms and kept moving with a steady gait. He had survived real hardship and true loss. A few judgmental looks from people who had never worked a day in their lives couldn't break his spirit. He didn't know that his simple, routine delivery was about to collide head-on with a high-stakes corporate war. He didn't know that Olivia Carter, the woman whose face was on every business magazine in the country, was currently trapped in a soundproof room just 50 feet away, looking for any way to escape a trap set by her own associates. Daniel was just looking for a signature, but he was about to sign up for the fight of his life. Before we continue, tell us where you're watching from in the comments. The ballroom felt like a golden cage, a labyrinth of silk, glass, and ego. As Daniel navigated the room searching for the coordinator, a man in a tuxedo that cost more than Daniel's truck stepped intentionally into his path. The man was swirling a glass of champagne, a smirk of pure arrogance etched onto his face. "Are you lost, boy? The service entrance is in the back alley where you and your kind belong," the man sneered, his voice loud enough to draw the attention of the surrounding guests. A few of his business associates laughed, a cold and biting sound that echoed against the high ceilings. Daniel took a half step back, maintaining his professional composure and his dignity. "I have a priority delivery for the event coordinator. I just need a signature so I can leave," he said, his voice deep, steady, and devoid of any fear. The man laughed again, stepping closer until he was inches from Daniel's face. "I think the only thing you should be delivering is a formal apology for ruining the aesthetic of this gala. Security! We have a trespasser!" Before Daniel could even attempt to move, the head of hotel security, a large, imposing man named Miller, approached with two other guards. Miller looked at Daniel with blatant, unfiltered contempt. "Sir, put that box down on the floor and come with us immediately. You're causing a disturbance and making the guests uncomfortable," Miller barked, reaching for his handcuffs. "I'm just doing my job. I was told to come here for the signature," Daniel replied, his pulse remaining remarkably calm. He had been in much tighter spots than a hotel lobby. "Your job is over. I'm escorting you out before I have to get physical." Suddenly, a loud crashing thud echoed from the heavy mahogany doors of the VIP lounge at the far end of the hall. The doors flew open with a violence that silenced the music. Olivia Carter burst into the room. She was wearing a stunning, floor-length, midnight blue gown that sparkled like a night sky under the spotlights. But her face was a mask of sheer, unadulterated terror. Her hair was slightly mussed, her breathing was frantic, and she was looking around the room as if searching for a miracle in a room full of ghosts. Behind her, two men in dark, expensive suits emerged. These weren't security guards. They were Mr. Sterling and his lead partner, men known in the city as corporate sharks who specialized in hostile takeovers. They had spent the last hour in a private, locked room using a legal loophole and a threat to her family legacy to try and force Olivia into signing away her voting rights in the Carter Group. When she had refused to sign the predatory contract, their words had turned into a physical blockade, cornering her until she finally found a moment to shove past them and run. Olivia looked at the room full of her friends, her investors, and her business associates. She saw them all looking away, their eyes suddenly fascinated by their drinks or their shoes. They were too afraid to interfere in a conflict involving men as dangerous and influential as Sterling. She saw her own security team, and in a flash of realization, she knew they had been bought. She was completely alone in a room full of people she had known her whole life. And then her eyes landed on Daniel. She saw the man standing his ground against the hotel security. She saw a man who didn't have a fake smile or a hidden agenda. She saw the steady, protective energy radiating from him like a lighthouse in a storm. In a moment of pure, raw, and desperate instinct, she didn't run to the police or her lawyers. She ran to the man in the blue delivery uniform. She grabbed Daniel's hand, her fingers trembling violently against his calloused skin. She pulled herself toward him, using his broad, unyielding shoulders as a physical shield. The entire ballroom went dead silent. The orchestra stopped playing, and the only sound was the heavy thud of Sterling's boots as he and his associate stopped exactly 10 feet away. "Olivia, stop being dramatic and childish," Sterling said, his voice as cold as liquid nitrogen. "We have a contract to finish in the lounge. Come back now before you make a scene that the board of directors won't easily forget." Olivia didn't say a word. She just held on to Daniel's hand tighter, her nails digging into his palm. Daniel looked at Sterling, then down at the terrified woman beside him. He didn't know the intricate politics of the Carter Group, but he knew the look of a predator and a victim. He thought of Lily. He thought of the man his daughter believed him to be. The hotel's security guard, Miller, stepped forward to grab Daniel's arm and separate them. "Sir, let go of her hand right now and move out of the way. This is family and corporate business. Don't make this difficult for yourself." Daniel didn't move an inch. He felt the weight of Olivia's fear and the icy greed radiating from Sterling. He took a decisive step forward, planting his feet and putting his massive frame directly between Olivia and the rest of the world. "She's with me," Daniel spoke. The words were quiet, but they carried the crushing force of a tidal wave hitting the shore. The room fell into an absolute suffocating silence. Sterling let out a dry, mocking laugh that didn't reach his eyes. "With you? You're a delivery driver in a cheap, sweat-stained uniform. Get your filthy hands off her before I have you thrown in a cell for the rest of your life. Do you have any idea who I am?" Daniel didn't move a muscle. He looked Sterling directly in the eye, his gaze turning into cold, hard flint. He wasn't a worker anymore. He was a wall. "I said, she's with me. If you want to talk to her, you have to go through me first. And I promise you, you don't want to do that. Would you stand up in that moment, comment, stand, or walk away?" Sterling's partner, a younger man with an arrogant smirk and a sense of invincibility, tried to push past Daniel's side to grab Olivia's shoulder. Daniel's hand shot out with the speed of a striking cobra. He caught the man's wrist in a grip that made the man's knees buckle instantly. "I wouldn't do that if I were you," Daniel said softly, his voice dropping into a register that signaled extreme danger. The man recoiled, clutching his numbing, throbbing wrist in genuine shock. The room erupted in a wave of gasps. A nobody had just laid hands on one of the city's top investors. Miller, the security guard, reached for his radio to call in a full tactical response team to swarm Daniel and take him down. But Olivia Carter finally found her voice. She stepped out from the safety of Daniel's shadow, though her hand remained firmly and resolutely resting on his forearm. "He's right," she said, her voice shaking but gaining a terrifying strength with every word she uttered. "I am with him. And Miller, if you touch him or if you finish that radio call, you are fired before you can even leave this floor. In fact, the entire security contract for this hotel will be under review by tomorrow morning." Sterling sneered, his composure finally beginning to crack under the public pressure. "A driver, Olivia? This is your grand plan to avoid the inevitable? You're losing your mind. He's a nobody from the streets." Olivia looked at Sterling with pure, unadulterated contempt. Then she turned her head to look at Daniel's profile. A flash of memory, sharp and vivid as a lightning bolt. She saw the small, jagged scar on his temple. She saw the way he stood with that slight, tactical tilt to his left, always keeping his eyes on the exits. "You don't recognize him, do you, Sterling?" Olivia whispered, her eyes filling with tears of sudden, overwhelming realization. The room went quiet again. Sterling blinked, his ego momentarily confused. "Recognize who? He's a delivery boy with a box." "4 years ago," Olivia said, her voice echoing through the vast ballroom like a tolling bell. The rainy night in November on Highway 99. The massive 15-car pileup that the news called a miracle because so many survived. The red sports car that was crushed like an aluminum can under the trailer of a semi-truck. The socialites in the room shifted uncomfortably. Everyone remembered that accident. It was the night the city's most famous heiress had almost died. The papers had spent weeks talking about the mystery angel who had saved her. "The paramedics told me later that a man pulled me out of that smoking wreckage," Olivia continued, her gaze locked on Daniel's calm, weathered face. "They said he used his bare hands to pry the jammed door open just seconds before the engine caught fire and exploded. They said he stayed with me in the mud and the freezing rain, holding my hand and telling me I wasn't allowed to give up until the sirens arrived." She looked at the stunned, silent crowd. By the time I woke up in the hospital 3 days later, he was gone. No name, no address, no request for a reward or a headline, just a hero who disappeared into the night like a ghost. She turned back to Daniel, her voice dropping to a whisper of profound gratitude. It was you. It was those same steady, kind eyes. Those same hands. I've spent 4 years trying to find you, and you just walked in here to deliver a package. Daniel remained silent for a long, heavy moment. He didn't want the fame, and he certainly didn't want the praise of this room full of people who had mocked him seconds ago. He had just been a man doing what was right on his way home to his daughter. Finally, he gave a small, humble nod of acknowledgement. The silence in the room was no longer mocking. It was heavy with a profound, stinging shame. The people who had laughed at his work boots and his Navy uniform were now staring at the floor, unable to meet his eyes. The security guard, Miller, slowly lowered his radio, his face turning a sickly shade of pale. Sterling realized the power dynamic in the room had shifted completely. He couldn't force a signature or intimidate a woman in front of a room that now saw her protector as a living legend. He adjusted his silk tie, his face twisting into a mask of feigned, cold indifference to hide his rage. This changes nothing about the corporate bylaws or the debt your father owes, Olivia. Sterling spat, his voice trembling slightly. We will see you in court, and I will take everything your family built. Let's go. He and his associate turned on their heels and marched out of the ballroom, their influence evaporating with every step they took toward the exit. As the doors closed behind them, the crowd began to surge forward, their faces now filled with fake, bright smiles, ready to congratulate the hero and get a photo with him. But Daniel didn't give them the chance. He wasn't interested in their shallow redemption. He looked at Olivia, his eyes softening just a fraction. Are you safe now, Miss Carter? She nodded, her hand still shaking as she wiped a stray tear from her cheek. Yes, because of you, again. You always seem to show up when the world is ending for me. Then I have to go, Daniel said simply. My daughter is waiting for me to read her a story before bed, and I'm already late for my shift. He turned to leave, picking up the box to finish the delivery, but Olivia caught his sleeve with a desperate grip. Wait, please, you can't just disappear into the shadows again. I can't stay here with these people. I need someone I can actually trust. Not a lawyer, not a hired guard, someone real. Daniel looked at her, seeing the billionaire heiress not as a symbol of wealth, but as just another person in desperate need of a shield. He thought of Lillian and the kind of world he wanted her to grow up in. He thought of the promise he made to his wife to always help those who couldn't help themselves. I'll be at the loading dock for 10 more minutes, Daniel said. If you need a ride home, it's not a limousine and it's not very clean, but it's safe and the doors lock from the inside. The choice is yours. Olivia didn't hesitate for a single second. She left her crystal glass, her designer purse, and her world of elite sharks behind. She walked out of the multi-million-dollar gala with the delivery driver, leaving the most powerful people in the city standing in stunned, shameful silence. Do you think people judge too quickly? Tell us in the comments below. The week following the gala was a whirlwind of legal battles and corporate espionage. Olivia had moved into a secure, undisclosed location to avoid Sterling's reach, but the shark was playing a long and vicious game. He had used his remaining influence to freeze the Carter Group's primary operating accounts using a security protocol malware he had hidden in the company's mainframe months ago. If Olivia couldn't reset the system and prove the sabotage by Friday at noon, the board of directors would be legally forced to trigger an emergency clause that handed temporary controlling interest to Sterling's firm. Her top-tier technical team, men with PhDs from the world's best universities, were completely baffled. The code was a labyrinth of dead ends, and the physical servers were locked behind an encrypted hardware bypass that refused to respond to any commands. Olivia sat in her temporary office, her head in her hands, watching the clock tick toward the ruin of her father's legacy. She thought of Daniel. She didn't just want him because he was a hero. She wanted him because he was the only person she had ever met who saw the truth through the noise. She called his personal number, a number he had scribbled on a napkin the night of the gala. Daniel arrived at the Carter Group headquarters 40 minutes later. He was in his usual work gear, carrying a small, battered metal toolkit. The high-paid engineers and security consultants looked at him with blatant, Unprofessional skepticism. Miss Carter, with all due respect, this is a multi-layered, state-of-the-art encryption failure. We need a cybersecurity specialist, not a logistics worker with a wrench. Daniel didn't argue. He didn't even look at the engineers. He walked straight to the glass-walled server room door and looked at the blinking patterns of the lights on the rack. He didn't look at the complex code scrolling on the monitors. He knelt on the floor and looked at the cooling pipes in the power distribution unit tucked in the back corner. Your software isn't the problem, Daniel said, his voice calm, steady, and authoritative. Sterling didn't hack your code from the outside. He overvolted the relay switch in the cooling array physically. The system thinks it's overheating beyond the point of fire, so it's intentionally locking the encryption keys into a burn vault to prevent data loss. It's a physical trap disguised as a digital one. The lead engineer scoffed, his face turning a deep red. That's impossible. Our thermal sensors would have caught a spike that large immediately. Not if the sensor is the thing he bypassed with a simple copper bridge, Daniel replied, not even looking up as he opened his toolkit. He moved with the surgical precision of a man who had disarmed bombs in another life. He manually bypassed the faulty relay and regrounded the cooling line. He flipped a small manual override switch that was hidden behind a layer of industrial dust. Within 5 seconds, the frantic red lights on the server rack turned a steady, peaceful green. The monitors in the control room flashed once, and then the access-denied screens vanished, replaced by the company's glowing logo. The system was wide open. Olivia gasped as she watched her family's legacy return to life on the screens. Daniel hadn't just saved her company. He had provided the physical evidence of Sterling's sabotage. Daniel stood up and wiped a smudge of black dust from his calloused hand. You have your evidence now. The relay has Sterling's firm's serial number on the bypass bridge. Wait, call the police and the feds. They'll be very interested in that physical evidence. Olivia looked at him, her heart full of a feeling she couldn't quite name. It was more than gratitude. It was a deep, resonant respect for a man who saw the world for what it was. Daniel, you keep saving my life and my world. Why won't you let me pay you? Why won't you take a senior position here? You're a genius. Daniel looked out the window at the city, his thoughts returning to Lily and the quiet life he had built. I'm a driver, Olivia. I like the open road. It's quiet and it lets me think about the things that actually matter. But if you ever need a friend who isn't looking for a signature on a contract, you have my number. And Lily would really like to meet the lady from the highway to hell one day. Should Olivia trust Daniel completely? Comment yes or no. Months passed like a blur. Mr. Sterling was currently in federal prison awaiting trial for sabotage and fraud, and the Carter Group was thriving more than ever before under Olivia's renewed, compassionate leadership. But the biggest change wasn't found in the stock price or the headlines. It was found in the CEO herself. Every Saturday morning, a silver Rolls-Royce, looking entirely out of place in the modest neighborhood, would park in a quiet suburban driveway. Olivia would step out, dressed not in silk or diamonds, but in simple jeans and a faded t-shirt. She would spend the entire afternoon in the backyard, helping Lily with her complex science projects, or teaching her how to play high-level chess on the grass. Daniel would be at the grill, a rare, genuine smile on his face as he watched them. He had finally allowed someone into their small, safe world. He had realized that he didn't have to carry the weight of the past or the protection of his daughter entirely alone anymore. One evening, as the sun began to set over the quiet suburb, painting the sky in shades of bruised purple and gold, Olivia sat on the porch steps next to Daniel. They sat in a comfortable, deep silence for a long time, the kind of silence that only exists between two people who have seen the very worst of each other and stayed anyway. I realized something today, Olivia said softly, looking at the fireflies beginning to blink in the tall grass. Daniel looked at her. What's that? Everyone in my life always wanted to be seen with me, Olivia said, her voice trembling slightly with emotion. They wanted the heiress. They wanted the cover story. They wanted the status of being near the Carter name. But you were the only one who stood up when I was at my absolute lowest and said, she's with me. You chose the girl, not the name. Daniel looked at his calloused hands, then at the house where Lily was laughing at a cartoon. I wasn't looking for an heiress, Olivia. I was looking for a human being who needed a shield. I've been that man my whole life. I don't know how to be anyone else. I know, she whispered, leaning her head on his shoulder. And that's why I'm never letting go. Lily ran out of the house then, jumping into Olivia's lap with a book of fairy tales. Daniel realized that his life wasn't measured in highway miles or delivery quotas anymore. It was measured in the laughter of his daughter and the warmth of a woman who had finally found a home that wasn't made of gold, but of integrity. He wasn't a nobody in a worker's uniform. He was a father, a protector, and finally a man who was no longer alone in the dark. We live in a world that obsesses over labels and surface-level appearances. We judge a book by its worn cover, a man by his work clothes, and a woman by the size of her bank account. We assume that those in the shadows have nothing to offer, while those in the bright lights have everything worth taking. But Daniel Hayes reminds us that true value is forged in the fire of character, not the glitter of wealth. It is the man who works in the dark who often knows the most about the light. It is the person with the least to lose who is often the most willing to give everything to save a stranger. Integrity is not a suit you wear once a year for a gala. It is the work you do every single day when no one is watching and there is no camera to capture it. And sometimes the nobody who stands in the back of the room is the only one with the strength to save the person in the front. If you believe that character is more important than status, comment integrity below. Subscribe to Iron Dad Stories for more powerful, heart-touching stories about everyday heroes who remind us what truly matters. Thank you for watching, and remember, always look for the hero in the shadows.